So now I had a plan. I had real, tangible hope that I could feel, coursing through me. That realization that hit me that night, it changed that changed everything. It felt good. I For so long I had run and hid from these feelings and thoughts, and just now I felt like I could really actually stand up to them for the first time, and it just felt good. I mean, I was excited. I was so amped up. I mean, I've that night I couldn't sleep that night. It Because I was just genuinely so excited and so ready for the next day to start fighting back against this, to finally really stand up to it. And it just, yeah, it was, I still remember just like I got out of bed. I was just walking around my room, just, I was so amped up for the next day. I've never been that ready for another day in my entire life. I mean, I was like, you think, kids are excited for, Christmas Eve night when Christmas is coming, and they're so excited they can't sleep that night. Like that was me, but probably even more because I was just so ready. I was so ready. I just wanted to fight back finally, and you I was just ready. Like, let's go. Like, let's do this. Like, I'm gonna win. Like, I'm gonna beat this. And so it was, yeah, it was a great moment. Um, and so that's where I was ready. I had been, as I said, all I had done for years and years was run and hide from these feelings and these thoughts. Ever since that day in sixth grade when I got laughed at for my motor tics, any anxiety, any uncomfortable situations, anything that, even situations that could have been positive, but if it came with any discomfort or anxiety, I went the other way immediately. Um, and it wasn't terrible when I was a kid. I was really good at avoiding it, and I still had safe spaces. But obviously, when my brain malfunctioned, it just empowered them. Seemingly, I didn't know how, but somehow that's what had happened. The feelings and thoughts now were so much stronger and so much harsher than they'd ever been. It was and so but now I was going to stand up to it, and no matter how bad it was, and I realized, it was like, I don't there's nothing to be afraid of here. There's nothing that I could feel if whatever I face here going forward, no matter how far into myself I go, there can't there's nothing to be afraid of, because with everything I had gone through in 2014, 15, that 18-month stretch of just endless misery, is like, there's no way whatever I'm going to face here is going to be worse than that. Most likely not even as bad. I highly doubted it would be that bad, because at least now it wasn't. I could be around other people, and there was positivity there, and I was building more positivity. And so whatever I was going to face, if I survive that 18 months, then I know I can get through this. Like, there's just no way that anything there is going to be worse than that. And so that gave me confidence. There was something my therapist had said to me a couple years prior to this that had always stuck with me, that was very validating, about what I'd been through. It was probably a couple years, it was 2016 sometime, a couple years after, the malfunctioning had began. And she said, as the last, you've been through several lifetimes worth of pain in the last couple years, in just the last couple years. But I actually feel worse for the rest of the world, uh, than I do for you, because all this time now that the world's been missing out on you. And while I appreciated what she's saying, I don't think I totally thought it was true. But what it really did was it validated what I had been through. It's really saying to me that, yes, what I had just experienced was like several lifetimes worth of pain in like a year and a half. it felt nice to hear that, because it's like there were so many times I found myself wondering, you know, was I really going through it, or was I just weak and not handling it well? Like, was it really that bad? Or like, you just kind of like gaslight yourself into like wondering, like, is it really that bad? Like, am I really in that much pain, or am I just weak and unable to handle it? So hearing her say that, just, it was like, okay, you know, I'm not imagining this. I'm not blowing this out of proportion. Like that really was as bad as it felt. Um, so it was nice. It was nice to hear that. And so, I took confidence from now that I'd gotten beyond it, that I say, if I went through that and made it, then there's nothing ahead that my mind's going to throw at me if I go deeper that is possibly going to be worse. And so now, that was the way forward. You know, I had always run and hid from those demons. Um, and now, instead of running, I was going to welcome them in with open arms. And because that's how you face it, that's how to face it. The answers to putting an end, to this anxiety, to this abuse in my head, they were going to be those demons, the thoughts and feelings that came with them. That's where the answers were going to be. So now, come get some. Like, let's do this. Like, come show me what you got. And so I really, really, now had started to. I had done some of this in the previous few months, but now I was really taking the time to sit with them, feel what was there, listen to those thoughts, listen to what they were saying, listen to what they were telling me, which was often not very pleasant, because I could really see the extent of the abuse that I was just kind of going along with. Um, I mean, something, obviously I've talked about the, having to be perfect to have a positive impact on others. That's a pretty ridiculous bar to set for yourself, that basically saying it's impossible for you to do that, by saying you have to be perfect. And, having, motor tics for so long, I'd always just believed I was lesser than everyone else because of them. It was something I got laughed at for and made to feel terrible about. And that eventually just grew into, yeah, I have motor tics, so I'm just lesser than other people by default. That's just how that was just part of my view of myself. And, some of the hardest ones, were, that people wouldn't want to be a part of my life because it was me, you know, so why would they? You know, the way the thoughts would yell these things at me when this anxiety would come up, it'd be, you can't show people, who you are or what makes you unique, because it's you. You can't be loved for these things that make you unique because it's you. You can't lead or inspire others because it's you. You can't make anyone's lives better because it's you. People don't want you a part of their life because it's you. And it just, I could see the way that it was just, you would just yell these things. These thoughts would just be yelling in my head when these feelings would come up. And, I know a lot of people, there's a kind of a misconception about this sort of thing. You might share something like that and people will be like, oh, how could you possibly think that of yourself? Like, how could you say that to yourself? Think that. But the reality is that I wasn't, actively thinking these things. I wasn't like choosing to fill my head with these thoughts. That was my mind reacting to what I was feeling. And those were the reactions those were the thoughts and ideas it was putting in my head. Now, I went along with them. I didn't stand up to them or oppose them. And that's where I played a part in them sticking around and that darkness growing. But, when that first happened, I was 12 years old. I was in sixth grade. I didn't know any better. I didn't know how these things worked or what was true and what wasn't true. While I certainly don't blame myself for, these thoughts and feelings taken root initially. The truth is my actions did result in them sticking around and those beliefs sticking. obviously, as I said, the malfunctioning made everything like 10 times worse. But that's, those actions, had I stood up to them earlier, they could have been stopped then. But like I said, I was a kid. I didn't know how any of this worked. So, I'm not going to sit here and blame 12-year-old me for not knowing how to handle that the right way. So that's just how things unfolded. And, now I had the opportunity to make a different choice, to stand up to it, I understood now. I understood what it was telling me. I understood how to make it stop. I understood that, it was wrong. It was wrong about the first one. And, just like I asked myself, what else could I get laughed at for as a 12-year-old? Now I had asked myself, if it was wrong about that, if it was wrong about me having to be perfect, then what else was it wrong about? And that's when I just started to question all of these things. And when I really put in what I had learned about anxiety, it really, really dawned on me that like this was all crap. And all those things that all those thoughts I just listed out, none of that was true. And my head wasn't being filled with those thoughts because they were true. My mind, as a kid, I just didn't want to get laughed at again. That's really what it came down to. And my mind was using those types of thoughts to keep me away from situations where I could be laughed at, right? If that's what anxiety is. It's our threat detector. It's how our mind tries to keep us safe. And it does that in part by, helping us avoid other negative feelings, because, ultimately anxiety's purpose is to keep us alive. But their, emotions don't work logically, so they're not going to always be logical. And so it was, again, like it wasn't, to give an example is probably the best way to describe it. My mind wasn't warning me that people won't like me, or that they'll laugh at me or think I'm weird or whatever it might be. It's warning me that, anxiety is warning me that if they don't like me, or if they laugh at me, or if they think I'm weird, then I will die. That's how you interpret it properly. And so realizing that, I was like, that's why you have to face it. That's why you have to act against it. Because even if the outcome you want in a situation doesn't happen, even if someone doesn't like me, of course that's going to happen. Not every single person on earth is going to like you. It's okay. That happens sometimes. It's not gonna kill me. I'm not gonna die from that. And so by acting that way, I could teach my mind that it's safe to put myself out there. It's safe to try. It's safe to talk to people, to communicate, to try to lead, to try to inspire, to try to find out if people want to be a part of my life, and, to try to positively impact others. That, I had to teach my mind that those things were safe by just trying to do it. Yes, I won't succeed every time. I'm not perfect. Not everyone's gonna like me. I'm not gonna succeed in inspiring and being the perfect leader, or whatever it may be. It's not gonna happen perfectly every time. But by continuously trying, I literally won't die from it. So then the anxiety will start to fade, and that was essentially the way forward. And so that was the plan. And now that I really, really understood this and really put it all together, it really filled me with confidence that I could, boom, that like, let's go, like I can do this. And another interesting is probably not a great word for it, but another part of the plan is, something I then started to do was, I realized I didn't actually remember what it felt like to be happy. And I was trying to remember, because, if I could recall that feeling, it would give me something to hold on to help strive for. But I just couldn't remember. It was weird. I tried to go through memories, pictures, anything, and I couldn't. I really could not remember what that feeling felt like, which is a difficult thing to really explain. But at first I thought maybe my brain was just my first thought was just, is my brain broken? Like physically, like did something happen when it malfunctioned like that? You know, I lost the ability to feel happiness. Like I didn't really know how any of that worked at the time, so I I didn't know what else to think. So I had actually planned for that. I had planned for, okay, if I'm not able to feel happiness, like then I'll have to find a way to, to exist like that. I figured at least even if I couldn't feel it, then I could at least try to provide it for those around me. Uh, you know, so I guess I'll just something to keep an eye on going forward. But yeah, that was the idea. And I mean, I figured as for, the depression, I mean, if I could get this constant anxiety to just shut up finally after 4+ years of it, I feel like that was probably why most likely why I was depressed. I mean, obviously, with Taekwondo and things, my life circumstances had improved, dramatically. The malfunctioning of my brain was fixed. The electrical activity had been normalized. I had stopped the neurofeedback in mid to late 2017, I think. I don't know the exact timing off the top of my head, but sometime in 2017. So, the electrical activity was normal now. So I figured the depression, was there because if, in that constant fight or flight mode, just nonstop, your own mind, you feel like your, life is under threat, then yeah, I feel like that would be enough to cause someone to feel depressed. And so I figured if I deal with this anxiety, then the depression should go. That was my thought process. So that's what I did. And of course, one thing I was always going to do was seeing how awful this abuse was to me, how awful it felt to have believed those things for so long. You know, I realized that my mind, I wanted to have a positive impact on people, and I realized that this darkness gave me the perfect blueprint on how to do that. Because I realized all I had to do was just treat people the exact opposite as my own mind had been treating me. Just see what my own mind was doing to me and do the exact opposite. And that would probably be a pretty good way to do it. And, I always felt like these unique parts of me wouldn't be liked, so I didn't let people see them and gave no one any chance to accept me for them. So I would, make sure that, the people around me would, the people that I care about would feel seen and get to feel accepted for their, uniqueness and just who they were as people, not be so judgy. I mean, my mind judged me for everything. And so I could see all the ways that I could, just show acceptance and not make people feel judged, and they could just feel comfortable just existing. And I could see how much, that could do for people, because I figured, I'm not that crazy. I know other people have these same kind of struggles. Their brains might not be malfunctioning like mine did, but I know anxiety and these types of thoughts are a very common, struggle. So just by interacting with people that way, I could provide them, with positive experiences in that regard, which could be a big help. And so that's the way. That's that summer in 2018. That was the plan. That was the plan. That was the path forward, and it was working. As I was now with that hope and confidence, I was really going at it, like every single day. It was all out war, and I was gonna win. That's how I viewed it. I mean, in every little way I could gain an advantage, I did. The way my mind had manipulated me, I sort of started doing my own manipulations. I personified this pain, this anxiety, almost into not really another person, but like there was someone else up here, a rival that I could, that had to be bested, and it would, motivate me. It became a competition of, its anxiety would tell me something that you can't, do this, and I'd be like, well, okay, let's. I guess we're gonna find out. And so that was, I've said that to myself so many times. And I feel like that was a good one. That was definitely a good one to go with. Was it's like, oh, you don't want to, you can't go talk to that person. They're just not gonna like you. You're gonna mess up their day or whatever nonsense. And just be like, well, I won't know if I can have a positive impact on that person if I don't try. So guess we're gonna find out. And so it just became that kind of competition. Is now of course I made sure the things I would do were not going to be like actual negative things. I didn't just mindlessly go against it. But so I'd always check things first, not just do the exact opposite of everything it says mindlessly. And but yeah, it just became that's what I did. And I as my confidence grew, I would say I became, I could say there was definitely some arrogance definitely grew in there. I mean, I always, like I said, I always kept myself checked and grounded. But when you're going against feelings and thoughts that are that strong, I mean, you gotta believe hard. Like you gotta be almost arrogant to be able to do it consistently all the time. Like it can't be something if you like to really go after it like this. If I was unsure of myself or of something, it wasn't going to work. It was too strong. So like that was something I used, that confidence, that feeling like I know this stuff better than anyone. Like I'm the best at this. Like I'm gonna win. Like that was the mindset, was just relentless. Be the best. Beat this darkness. Like you can do this better than anyone. Go and do it. And so that was the way I saw it. And like I said, it became my rival to best in every possible way. And and because the more I did that, the more I stood up to it, the better things got. The more anxiety eased up, the less the less I would feel constantly throughout the day. That was doing the right work. So that was the way I followed. It's probably the one time in my life I've truly ever been arrogant about anything. What was my approach to that? That's definitely not. I'm not an arrogant person. I think anyone knows me. This arrogance is not something that I have. I'm confident in myself now, but I don't really do anything with that level, with the level of arrogance that I did that with. And so, yeah, I always, I suppose I use the rest of my life to always make sure I, don't let that arrogance, bleed over into other areas, because I definitely never ever wanted to have that I can't speak, to interfere with how I treated people, so I would never, which I never did. I never let that arrogance was just for that battle and that battle only. And so, yeah, no, I'll say, I was proven wrong about the happiness thing over that summer, maybe sometime in August. I remember I started to, as the anxiety was lighting up, the depression was really lighting up as I was progressing, and I could, I was starting to feel happy again. And that was really nice. I remember telling myself I've never been more glad to be wrong about something than I was about that. Because that would have sucked. I would have, to have to not be able to feel happiness ever. So yes, that was really nice to be wrong about that, and just to feel happy again after everything that had happened the last 4+ years. To really feel real, genuine happiness was really cool. And it was a sign that it was working, that where the direction I had chosen, the path I was now on, fighting back this ferociously every single day, was the right way forward. And even another part of it was, at night, that's where I did my best thinking. That's where I would kind of take in the day's events, and maybe just as I'm laying in bed listening to music before I go to sleep, I would think things through, write some things down in my notes app on my phone, whatever conclusions that I came to, thoughts I needed to think more on, or what ways I could, face other parts of this, just anything, whatever needed to be, taken note of, I would jot it down and think it through. And yeah, and then finally by the end of the summer, I know it's in September, that constant anxiety buzz had finally stopped. And that was, wow. I mean, I remember that was nuts. I remember when it was like first gone, it's just, I had just a normal morning, came, ate breakfast, and I could feel that it just was quiet for once. And I could, I didn't know what to do. Like, I still had some time before I came in for, Taekwondo. And it's like the things I'd normally done was just to, distract it away, or, the things I'd done for entertainment was not really for entertainment, but just to get away from that, that buzz in my head. There's just that anxiety screaming all the time. But now it wasn't there. And I just didn't know what to do. I remember sitting on the couch for probably an hour and a half, and I just kind of stared at the wall. It was, if you didn't know any better, you'd think like, what the hell's wrong with him? But it was just, I could just sit there, and it was quiet for once. And so it was just nice to just sit there with the calm and peace, just to have some of that. That was just a really cool thing to get to experience. I mean, like I said, I knew it was, I was nowhere near done, but, again, things were progressing so strongly in the right direction. And even I even stopped, my therapy sessions with both therapists, the anxiety specialist and the other one at the neuroscience team, by the end of the summer. It wasn't needed anymore. I mean, it kind of just was, it had gotten to the point where I was basically going in for the session, describing all the things I was doing, going through everything. And, it was basically just like them saying like, yeah, that's the right stuff. Like, even the anxiety specialist, she had some ideas, that things we could do together, to kind of practice this, but hearing all the things I was doing, I was literally doing it already. So it was just, yeah, it was one of those things where, they said, if you ever need a session, you ever need to talk, like, we can set something up anytime. But, at this point, there's, you got this, like, that you're doing all the right things. And, just, there's no need, if you want to keep the sessions going, go for it. But, they were totally on board with, stopping, because I was just kind of reciting what I had done the past week or so, and, then doing it again. So yeah, so it was cool. I was, out of therapy, I was really handling this really well on my own and just going at it. And so it was just kept going. Now we get, I started to think, now that I had progressed so much, what more can I do? I tried to think of what ways could I take this to an even more levels. How can I do more here? And that's when I thought about, getting as I decided to get a second job at working at the tutoring center, a learning center at Hartford Community College. Now, I was still part-time, at Chung's for Taekwondo, and so I had all this extra time, and, I realized, there was still room for me to do more. There was still a lot more work to be done, against those, abusive thoughts. Yeah. And so I thought of the idea of getting the job there, and, that was kind of a great idea. Again, it would involve teaching something I was comfortable with and good at, math, chemistry stuff, like stuff those were all strengths, and I'd get to interact with, different age groups, especially that, college level age, that, 20 people in their 20s, and something I didn't get a lot at with, Taekwondo. A lot of kids, teens, and parents, but there wasn't a ton of, in that age range, which is, at the time I was, 25, 26, around then. So I didn't get a lot of in any of that age range there. And so this would kind of give me, more social type settings too and so I just thought that was a great idea. I mean, that would bring up a whole kind of area, of life that I hadn't really gotten to go at yet. And so, yeah, so that was my primary reason for getting a second job. I mean, it'd be, cool to make some more money too, but the biggest reason I did it was so that way I could, allow me to keep taking this fight up another level. And it did. It did exactly that. And so that was, yeah, so that ended up being that was a good idea. That really, really worked. That gave me a whole lot of other, ways to face this and beat it, to to continue to strip down, anxiety and this darkness's control, over me. And, so we hit, 2019, and, I had some, I started to think about, some things. It's like, man, I've made so much progress, even in just the last 6 months. It's like, I started thinking, to branch out my thinking of what else could be possible here. I thought, maybe it would be possible. I would think it would be possible to have positive, intrusive thoughts the same way that I've had these negative ones for so long. And so I figured, if circumstance can work out for them to be negative, then if I do enough work, I should be able to teach my mind to give me positive ones. That would make sense based on my understanding of things. And I had a really important sort of revelation that I started thinking back to that impossible dream I had had. And I started to realize, or not, maybe not realize, but I started to wonder, maybe that impossible dream isn't so impossible after all. Maybe that can be brought to life. I mean, look, it felt like where I was from, the beginning of 2019, from 6 months prior, was like, it felt like magic to have made that much change. Like, so much, I had done so much, and it literally just felt like magic, the way that I had freed so much of myself from anxiety's clutches. It was such a drastic difference. That was like, why wouldn't that be possible? If I can do all this, who knows what there may not be limits here. So that's that. I started to sometimes, sort of live that impossible dream in my head again. Imagine what it would be like to go through a whole day free of all of it. No abusive thoughts. Obviously I had gotten rid of, the depression was gone. I had made some really good strides on, against anxiety, but now it was just, maybe one day I could really be free of all of it and wouldn't have to hear that stupid voice in my head ever again. Maybe that was really possible. And so, yeah, that became my new goal. My top priority was, not just to beat anxiety here and, get away, be able to break free of its control, but to really, find a way to put an end to that darkness for good. And yeah, I felt I could do it. I felt, based on my understanding, based on the experiences I'd had now and the confidence I'd gained from it, and seeing this stuff really, really work, I thought, yeah, I should be able to do it. It's not going to be easy, and I'm going to have to keep going and continue going at it as hard as I've been, but it should be possible. And that was a good thought. That was an exciting thought. And so now we're moving it to 2019, and 2019 was the first good year I had had in a long time. That was a good year for me. Because while I was still doing the work and continuing to do the work, I had gotten to a point where I could really enjoy life and enjoy, Taekwondo and teaching, which I love to do, and just, be happy, which I knew was another good thing to do anyway, was to just, while I'm, continuing, to do the work, but, you got to take the time to enjoy the fruits of my labor here. I mean, I get to be happy. I get to do something I love to do every day. And that's just a great privilege to get to have. So yeah, it was just going to also, enjoy these things. While things are good, you got to take the time to enjoy it. So that was what I did too. So it was great to get to enjoy things at the same time. So that's kind of what 2019 was. With 2018 was the kind of transformative year. 2019 was the, get to really enjoy that, the fruits of that transformation and all the work that I had been doing. And so, yeah, it was a good year. It's hard to really say much else other than that. I'll say by Labor Day of 2019, I took a prescription pill for the last time, and which was a pretty cool moment. I had once been told I might need prescription medication for the rest of my life to help me manage with these things, and now on that day was the very last prescription pill I took, and haven't needed any since. So it's been 6.5 years now almost since then. So pretty cool milestone to hit there. So yeah, now of course, just as things were really, really good, something odd started to happen. Something new, as I'd, grown with, the connections I had built, through, Taekwondo and even, tutoring it. I had, people that I'd gotten close to. Something weird started happening that I didn't really know how to explain it. It was, it just really was, it was bizarre. And, it was like, I would, like I said, someone that I knew really well, was really comfortable with, had was almost friends with even, that had a really strong, started to have built a strong connection with. I would, maybe there was, some slight imperfect moment, or even if there wasn't something, it, all of a sudden it would feel like I would, like that, like all those good experiences just didn't happen. And like I could feel like the loss of it having not happened. Like it hurt, like my heart would just hurt. Like it was like I had just lost them, and none of it was real. And and now I noticed I could sort of reset things. Like you have a positive interaction, and all of a sudden it all just clicks in. It all comes like rushing back, and it's like, oh, like it would be such a relief. But it's like, why did this start randomly happening? And, it was like suddenly emotional permanence was like in question. And like, it wasn't, and I know sometimes there can be anxiety over like, this kind of thing with, you wonder if something is, real, or like, if someone's not there. Like, I know like, there can be struggles with emotional permanence. It just, I just didn't understand why this randomly started happening. Is because this nothing like this. It almost felt like it was like I was reliving something that had happened before, but nothing like this had happened. Like at no point, in my life had I ever questioned whether experiences I had with people were real, or were the people that were my friends, were they? I mean, I had my own self-worth, issues there, but it was never like this. Like the friends I had, I knew they were my friends. I didn't question it. So for this to happen like that and hurt so much, and then I didn't really understand why at all this would have been happening. But no matter, I could see that I could, kind of click things back into place by having a positive interaction. So it was a pretty abusive cycle to have to keep doing this. I would just go from, oh, it's, those connections aren't real. Like, and my mind would use that same abuse on me as when I would feel these things. And so it would, I'd have to it became started to become challenging to, interact with people that, I cared about, that I knew, the new connections I had built. It I'd have to like fight for them to be real, to stay real. And otherwise it would just hurt like I had lost it, like it never happened, and then my mind would say, well, it's because it's you, and people don't want to be part of your life, and it just it sucked. It was annoying, it hurt. And I was like, all right, well, I guess I gotta teach my mind that this isn't, whatever this is, it's not happening. Like you know, I just keep standing, just keep standing up to it. Keep acting against it, because whatever this is, it's not necessary. It isn't. These connections are real. I knew they were real, and I would just have to show my mind that that's the way it is, and hope it would follow my lead. And so that's what I did. It was annoying, it was painful, but that was, I guess, just something I had to do now. And but I figured, maybe I didn't really have any answers for it, but if I keep going and keep going deeper, then perhaps the answers will reveal themselves, or I'll stop it from happening, and that'll be that. And so one thing now, as we go through 2020, and yeah, COVID, yes, that was I suppose that COVID did impact my fight some, because obviously we had like online classes for a bit, so there was less chances to interact with people in person, which obviously hurt the momentum a bit, because that was less work I could do. I certainly didn't go backwards at all in that time. I I mean, I was lucky enough to have pretty positive circumstances to deal with something like a pandemic. I mean, I had already lived with my parents at home, so it was, and they worked from home, and so and I was able to do the online classes, online Taekwondo classes, with Chung's. So it was, yeah. Luckily, I was pretty thankful for the life circumstances I had there that were pretty good, or I should say as good as they could be. It wasn't really a whole lot of good going on then, but yeah, I had seen that, given I was so comfortable with discomfort, that the discomfort and that a situation like a pandemic caused was, I guess I could call it a comfort zone for me. I mean, I was used to feeling this way. I was used to feeling like things were falling apart, and there was anxiety everywhere, and things were difficult. And so that was, I felt like it sort of became a chance for me to, to try to, be the comfort for others, be the calm, be the positive presence, for others who were struggling. And a lot of people were struggling, and rightly so. And so I just you tried to use my experiences. I suppose it opened up some newer opportunities to, to share my story, to be more personal, and just to help, connect with people, and inspire and provide hope in a very, very difficult time for, a lot of people, the whole world really. And so I did my best to use my experiences positively in that time. And but yeah, so I just, yeah, but it didn't really impact my fight. This fight here maybe just slowed it down a little bit, but yeah, so just kept at it. And one thing I really started to realize was, it was, in a time like this, when anxiety struggles were elevated dramatically, all around me. One of the last things my therapist said to me, was, she said, seeing how well I was doing with all this, she said, one day you're really going to help somebody with something like this, and it's going to be amazing. And I definitely didn't believe that at the time. I definitely couldn't have imagined actually helping somebody with anxiety struggles or something of that nature. And but I appreciated the sentiment, But now, as I had progressed and seen how much change I had made within myself and really started to understand how anxiety worked, how the mind worked, the psychology of everything, I had learned so much from my experiences. And, I started to realize, she was, I think she was right. Again, I was like, I bet I really could help people with this. And I even realized, that would be not just a really, really positive way to use my experiences, but that would be a really, really effective way to elevate this fight to an even higher level. Because essentially, what I would be doing would be, helping people with, a really significant, life struggle. And I would basically be helping them by teaching them to be more like me. And I really couldn't think of a way that I could possibly stand up to that darkness more than that. I mean, what more could I possibly do to stand up to it by really helping someone significantly like that? By teaching them to be more like me. Like, that was like, I realized, I was like, that would be really, that would be a significantly way to really do some good in the world around me, use my experiences for good, and then in turn help me go deeper and maybe figure this out and, put an end to it. So that was just, that was like, oh, this is a great idea. Like, I got to try this, because if I can do that good for others and then in turn myself, then, that it would be foolish of me not to try. And if I needed any confirmation that this was definitely the right move, is, my mind did not like it really didn't want me to doing anything like that. And so that's how I knew. It was like, okay, yeah, this is definitely I'm gonna try to make this happen. Not really sure how, but I'm gonna keep an eye out for opportunities to, mentor and, or, using this, be a listener, whatever it may be that I can do. If there was an opportunity to go above and beyond, I was going to try. If I felt the situation, if situations that I would be suited for, and if it would be a positive for me to do so, I was going to try. And so I have, long story short, obviously some of those experiences are, really personal and not necessarily my stories to tell. So I won't divulge details there, but I can say I have had some very meaningful and positive experiences doing that. I've, one in particular stands out where I've really, really was able to impact some lives positively like this. And that really was really, really meaningful to be able to use all the stuff that I had just, done to, turn my life around and really start, get to a positive place, to be able to, use that to then, help others, hopefully get there too. And that was, what a really cool thing to be able to do, and to be in a place where I'm doing that is, that really was incredibly meaningful. And the thing about it is, I knew what was going to happen. I knew that if I was able to find a really, really, or I should say find, but have a really, really positive experience, helping somebody with that, I knew once it, if it got to the point where it ended, like if I had helped them enough where they, could, go off on their own, I knew exactly what would happen when I got to that point. I knew my mind would turn it against me, like it had been doing. Like I would be made to feel that it wasn't real and that it didn't happen. And I figured, let's, push deeper, and, maybe in doing that, I can put an end to this, or at least find out more of what the heck is going on here with this. And it did play out exactly as I had expected. when I had, one particularly, special experience that, in helping someone, and once it ended, you know, positively, the person I'd helped got to the point of, they were going to handle it on their own. That's My mind went full reality twisting against me, and it was such a meaningful experience that it hurt so much more than, you know the rest. And it was so painful. And but when this happened, this was now we're in summer 2021. When this happened, it it felt like there was more here than the rest. Like there was like I was like practically like depressed again, but it felt like there was more going on here than just that. Because I don't really know how to explain how I can tell this, but I could tell that a lot of this pain wasn't that. It wasn't that loss. It wasn't losing those experiences. It was something else. It was overwhelming. It was really painful. That was ended up being a fairly difficult summer. It just, it just hurt, and I didn't know what it was from, but it was something. Like it felt like I had been digging and digging and digging for so long. It felt like I unearthed something, and as soon as I tapped into it, it just like exploded into my face and just totally like knocked me out. And it overwhelmed me. I just like, what is all this? What is all this pain? Like why am I feeling so heartbroken here? Why does it feel so alone? Like what is this? And then I started noticing some strange things. There was I had a get together with friends on July 4th, and it was bizarre because I was kind of in pain here, but I thought, okay, maybe seeing these friends should help. I'll feel good. Get to feel those connections, and I hadn't really seen them a whole lot in the last bunch of years anyway, because obviously my life went one way and theirs went entirely another way. And since I wasn't really in a state to really be hanging out with people for a while, so I thought, okay, it would be, haven't done a whole lot of this kind of stuff, so it would be, positive to see people. But it wasn't. I was expecting to feel, something good, from these connections, but it felt like I was hanging out with ghosts. Like that. I remember saying that exact thing to myself. Like I knew, and like I felt almost afraid, and it felt so disconnected. And I felt inferior around them. It reminded me of a little how I felt when those girls had laughed at me in sixth grade about the motor ticks, but that didn't make any sense because that never happened with them. That never happened here. And it's like what I knew of my experiences with them, but what I was feeling were just two completely different things. It like that's how it felt. It was just like this conflict in my mind over which one is real, like what I know or what I'm feeling. And it wore me out quickly, and it just totally caught me off guard. I just didn't understand what was this. And so it just kind of befuddled me as I, had gone home and was thinking through this. I didn't know that was really odd. But I would just, keep going and see if I can maybe figure this out. And then I noticed it again. We had a family gathering later that summer, and I noticed the same thing around them. It was like what I knew from my experiences, what I knew of the good experiences I had with my family and friends, and then what I was actually feeling around them was completely different. I wasn't feeling the good things, the love, the connection, the joy you would feel from seeing the people you've known and loved for most of your life. But it wasn't happening with, say, the people at Taekwondo, the families I'd gotten to know really well, students I had strong connections with. It was normal. I mean, yeah, things had been, twisting against me and I'd had to fight through that, but I could, once when it was good, I could feel the past experiences with someone I know, let's say, a student I'd had for 4 years or so. I could feel that positive connection there. And so I was like, why it's not happening here, but it's happening, with my old friends and family. So like, what is this? What's going on here? And so I spent just more time thinking about what this could be. And, I began to, wonder, I'd always kept my mind open to unusual or outside the box ideas just because I knew my brain had malfunctioned pretty significantly for a while. So, I thought about how what I knew and what I felt was different, very different. And I began to wonder, what if that wasn't a coincidence? What if that's what happened? As in, like, those memories somehow, the emotions that were attached to them somehow were changed to different emotions. As I noticed, it felt around them, it had often felt how I felt in that moment when I got laughed at. And so what if the emotions that were attached to those memories, because I don't know a ton about memories, but I knew, like, you have, all memories, have like emotions tied to them, and that's usually what helps make them more significant. And so it felt like, what if it was hard not to think eventually that what if those emotions had changed? That kind of sounded like a nuts idea. So I was like, if that's going to be the case, if those emotions that were tied to those events had changed, then I feel like that would mean that wherever those are stored in your mind, it must be separate. If one, I thought about, like, if one file, the emotional file got corrupted, but, the memories were still totally intact, that would make sense if they were two separate files. If they were one together, then I feel like the whole thing would have been messed up. But the events I still remembered. And so I did a little research on, the mind, and what I found was that the event memories, like the memories of the event, they are processed in the hippocampus and stored in the neocortex. The emotional memories, which, are the emotions that are tied to memories, are, processed and stored in the amygdala, which is a separate part of the mind. And the amygdala is also where anxiety is processed. So suddenly this wild theory that sounded crazy when I first said it out loud, suddenly that started to, I was like, this could actually be what happened. I mean, it's like, that is, as crazy as this is, I didn't even know if that was possible, but I mean, I'd always wondered if there was going to be some long-term damage from my brain malfunctioning like that. And so maybe this was it. And, I could tell that all of the connections, all those memories that were seemingly, the people that I was having this issue with, where the emotions were not matching what I remembered, all were connections that began before 2014, when the malfunctioning started. And all of the connections that this wasn't happening with, where what I felt and what I remembered of those experiences was all lining up, were all connections that happened after the malfunctioning had stopped. And so I thought about it even deeper, is like, well, if this had happened when it malfunctioned, but I didn't feel it then, I knew that it was possible for our minds to bury pain that's so overwhelming that your mind almost feels like you won't survive it, so it just buries it. And given how much I was already going through in that period, there was no way I was there's no way I was handling any more. And so yeah, maybe and that my mind buried it, and that's what I had tapped into over that summer, and that's what exploded into my face. And perhaps that's what was going on here. That's what was happening. Uh, I was, that's what had been happening. Because when you have pain that is buried like that, the emotions, you sort of, we kind of experience life, the events of life and then the emotions of life. And we experience things very linearly. And so, while event wise, I kept going, emotionally, it's like a part of me was stuck back where that pain was. And that's how you kind of, if you don't really process things, and you just try to hide from them, that's why they start to happen in the present, because you haven't gone through those emotions yet. So they start happening around me. And that's exactly what was happening here. I was sort of experiencing that exact thing. Like my experiences weren't real, and it was instead just painful ones where I, felt alone, and whatever other negative things came up. And I was because I hadn't processed any of this or had to actually experience it yet, I was, sort of reliving it in the experiences around me. And that made sense. Like that, as crazy as it was, that actually made a lot of sense. And it also answered a lot of questions, I had, because I still had doubt. Like I was still like, this still sounds nuts. But as I applied it, this theory to the rest of the unanswered questions I had, things really kind of started to fall into place. Going back, even to 2015, when, what happened to my social skills? Why did it feel like they were gone? Like those experiences weren't there. I had no social instincts whatsoever, even to talk to my own parents. And so I thought, well, if there's those instincts come from, feelings, that's what instincts are. So in order, those instincts came from the positive feelings and the positive experiences I'd had. But if those experiences had been altered into negative ones, if I had instead of, had felt alone or in those experiences, or humiliated or abused or heartbroken or whatever negative things I could have felt, if that's how you were made to feel around somebody, your instinct, what would your instinct be to say to them? Nothing. You wouldn't really have any instinct to talk to them. You wouldn't want to talk to them at all. And that, suddenly that made sense. Like I remember not even knowing how to have a conversation with my own mother. And suddenly now I think I had an answer for why that was. And it just like, it started to make sense. I'm sure there's several other things that I'm not remembering off the top of my head that I'll probably remember as soon as I finish this video. But, it suddenly things started to make a lot of sense. And I think this came out years before, and I think that's what put me in the hospital in 2018. That I think I had kind of tapped into this pain, and that's what had overwhelmed me. And then the medication I went on there kind of put it back, away, buried again. And because certainly then I would not have been ready for something like this. But yeah, it felt good. I was like, this actually, like, this makes perfect sense. Like it fits so well. Everything just, as wild as it sounded, it all made sense. It all fit so perfectly that it had to be the answer. And so it was, it felt pretty satisfying to be able to kind of piece this together and finally, have that answer. Unfortunately, that didn't take away from how awful it was to experience all this. And it was, don't let my positive tone here fool anyone. This was experiencing this, because now I unearthed this pain, and I was basically now experiencing the pain of all of those past experiences that now had negative emotions attached to them. The heartache, the loneliness, the you know everything. It just those were the two big ones that and that's how those past experiences now felt. And I hadn't processed, so that's a whole lifetime of experiences that had now been essentially corrupted, and all this heartache and loneliness to feel from those experiences. And yeah, it was not a fun time. It was difficult. And I guess I'll give this is probably the best example way I can describe what it felt like. And so let's think of, if you were to think of the happiest memories you have. You can pick one. You can find a picture or a video that that makes you feel that nostalgia, love, happiness, something really, really positive that you can really draw a positive feeling from. And so really, and then yeah, so if you have that, then now think of, now for the the crap part of this, think of the worst, the most alone or humiliated or heartbroken, or you know the worst you've ever felt. you know and now imagine, if when you think of that happy memory, that look at that picture, or think of that loved one, that connection, in instead of feeling the happy feelings, now you feel all those same feelings from your worst moments. That is essentially what happened to all of my interpersonal memories, memories with other people. That's, my parents, my brother, all my family that I had loved, all my friendships growing up, all the friends that I'd had, all of those experiences now contain nothing but pain and emptiness. And it was difficult, is probably not saying it. It doesn't really come close. I mean, I couldn't look at a picture of myself with friends as a kid or with family and feel anything good anymore. No matter what I did, I looked, everywhere, and there was nothing positive left. I couldn't feel that anything good, that love, that connection. I couldn't feel it with any of them anymore. Everyone that I had ever loved and cared about, I couldn't feel it. And I could see that it was still there for others. I could see, like, when people that I had known my whole life see me, how happy, the genuine, happy to see me. I could tell that they could still feel it, but I just couldn't. It was, I mean, even, I still lived in the house I had grown up in, had so many good memories. I could think Christmas, so many happy Christmas mornings, were opening presents in our living room. And, when Christmas came that year, 21, all I could, feel, the Christmas tree set up, all I could feel was heartache, and just felt entirely alone, even though I wasn't. But that's all I could feel. I tried to think of those past memories, but there's nothing there but this same heartache and loneliness and emptiness. That's all that these memories had now. And it was so difficult. It was coming to terms with this is how it was now. I mean, at one point down the road, I cleared out my room of pictures, anything that connected me to past experiences with family or friends. I got rid of it because it just eventually you know, it, I kept things around, to be able to process things, but eventually there was nothing positive about it. It just was reminding me of that emptiness. So I just got rid of it because what was the point? There was no memory to hold on to anymore. And yeah, so I've always wondered if this would make sense to people if I try to explain it. I've not shared it with many. I've never, okay, no, that's not true. I have, but yeah, it's just, I hope that anyone watching this has absolutely no idea how this feels. No idea. I hope you can't even imagine it, because I would not wish this on anyone, to have to feel that, to have your life's memories and connections just ripped away from you. You know, it's funny, when you think about, losing loved ones. It's, you can still hold on to the memories, the connections there. You might keep something of them that, reminds you of that, that you can look at and be reminded of that, positive times you had with them and how positively that connection has impacted your life. But that's the part that I lost, was what you would hold on to and look back on, fondly, is, how those memories made you feel, how you felt with those people. And that's what was gone, was all of it it was gone now. And wow, the ways that changed me, the ways that, processing this, changed the way my feelings worked significantly, it was significant. I learned firsthand just how important those experiences are, as that our experiences are, especially, growing up and, having those positive experiences. And I had, as, my childhood truly was, I couldn't have asked for a better childhood. I had a safe and loving home always. I had great friends. I always had, good experiences. Of course, there were bad days, like everyone has, but I couldn't have asked for a more perfect childhood. And I had no idea how, even with the struggles I'd had with, self-worth, issues there, I still was fine. I was still good, but now, with not having those experiences, is now, instead of having a, childhood full of experiences, that all I can feel are, was alone and abused and heartbroken. That's all I can feel in those past experiences now. And the way that changes, the way that impacts you emotionally, it's crazy. Like I said, I could probably sit here for another couple hours and go through the challenges this now presented me with. It was so hard to handle things that now, that with this out here. And it was difficult. And that's, yeah, it was really hard. That was so difficult. I guess you can tell that I've healed, because I can sit here and laugh about how hard it was. That'll come later in the story. But for now, it was dealing with that in the present was excruciating. This was, this was the reality now I had. So there was no point in, complaining about it, or, thinking, why did this happen to me? It's just have to find a way to move forward. I mean, remembering, none of these people actually did anything wrong to me. That, the way I felt wasn't because of what anything they did or how they made me feel. I was just the unlucky soul that had his brain malfunction, and somehow, some way that led to, whatever something happened in my brain there, the disconnect between those parts of my brain. I don't know enough about neurology to really give an exact explanation there, but somehow, some way, that's, the wrong emotions are associated with the wrong memories now, and there's unfortunately nothing I can do to get those positive feelings back. Those experiences are gone. I figured I can neutralize as much as I possibly can by just processing these negative things, coming to terms with things, of course, accepting that, they didn't actually do these things, so I can't, allow myself to be mad at people or upset with people for doing things they didn't do. And then just hopefully I can neutralize as much as I could, so at least being around them wouldn't, be so painful anymore. And, perhaps, I one day can, if I can neutralize this, I can try to build something new, and it's, have new positive experiences that could, start to overwrite these negative ones. And so despite all this, there was a way forward here, and it did give me the answers on why this was happening to me, because I was, would this be enough to be technically labeled PTSD, give me an actual diagnosis? I don't know. It didn't really matter to me because I knew, what I could do about it. It was this unprocessed pain that was causing me to have the people in the present sort of twisted against me the same way my past emotional memories had been twisted against me, and I didn't know it. So by processing all of this pain that was in there that had been buried, that should get me to the other side of it. And if I process all of it, or at least enough of it, that what was happening to me in the present with the new people I was meeting should stop. So as awful as this was, I did have a way forward. I did have a path to accomplish what I had set out to accomplish, which was put a stop to this. And, bringing that impossible dream to life was still very much on, if even so, more so. Unfortunately, it was just going to be very, very difficult, because processing all of this pain meant letting it in and letting it tear me apart, which was really the only way. And I had no way of knowing how long this was going to take, because that was certainly a lot of memories that are going to be corrupted now, and that's going to be a lot of heartache and a lot of loneliness and a lot of other feelings to go through. But that was the only way. So I really held on to that, impossible dream, and, motivated myself that this is what has to be done. And so it really took a lot of belief and almost arrogance in myself to be like, yes, I know how this works and I'm right about this. So I just have to go do it. And so I know I would, at least coming to this, it kind of helped to get to that point where I was like, okay, I see what's happening. I have a plan. It did help some, but, I essentially, I tried to sort of keep it in the back as much as I could throughout the day, because I needed to still do, my job correctly and teach Taekwondo and teach it well, and, help making sure I'm doing everything well here, as a part of my job, which I did to the very, very best of my ability. And it would be the real work, would be, at night when I was, alone, and then I could really open the floodgates and let it out. And so that's what I would do. Once it was, nighttime, it was just me, and I would open the floodgates and I would let it all in. And I would basically just collapse to the floor. And it would just tear me apart. I'd go through memories, go through connections, and find as much of it as I could and just let it have its day so I could emotionally get past, process it all and get past it. And so each night I would just basically lay on the floor and let it do its thing. And I would just lay there until I could physically pick myself back up to go to bed each night. And, I think a lot of times it was about an hour, but it would go longer. Sometimes it'd be 2 hours, some nights even 3 hours. And once I could feel that I could actually pick myself up off the floor, then I would call it a night and go to bed. And I figured, this could drag on for years if I don't, do it as much as possible. And, I figured I'd rather just brute force it and go full speed ahead than drag it on. I mean, this fight's already dragged on long enough. I didn't want to have to spend years processing all this, so I did it every single night. I did it, figured just get it over with as fast as humanly possible so I can get past this. And, well, all in all, from the time I first unearthed that pain in June of that summer, it took until middle of January, I would say, of 22 to finally reach the end of that, to finally get to fully cleared out that pain that had been buried. That's when I finally noticed there was nothing more to dig up. The pain had been cleared and processed, and I could begin to try to move forward with this, new set of circumstances, which were not fun. And, well, as I reached, the end and could feel that I had, there wasn't much left, pain left sort of buried there. What was happening in the present, it started to stop. It did unfold exactly as I had hoped, as I had envisioned it would. That once I had fully gone through all of that pain over all those months, once I had finished that, it stopped. I stopped reliving it, in the present. And I had always figured, I can't get back, what was lost, but I can stop losing what I have now. I can stop losing those experiences, those connections, and having them warped against me and then having to fight to get them back and just keep doing that over and over. I could at least build connections that were new and not have to deal with that anymore. And that was a major, major relief. That finally it had stopped. I could not have to worry about dealing with that anymore. So that was really nice. It was. So it had worked, and so now I just had to try to keep going. I mean, this was a big deal. This was a big win, if that's what you can call it. I don't know if win's the right word for it, but stopping that was a significant step towards getting that impossible dream to come to life. That was one big step closer to everything I had been working for forever now. And so that's what I mostly just stayed focused on, continuing to do this work, continuing to defy this, this abuse. And I figured if I keep going now, this was the source. This is where it was coming from. So now that I have now taken away the source of that abuse, that I should be able to work through what's left and finish it off and put this long, grueling fight behind me finally. And one thing that I did notice after, a couple more months, I noticed another significant piece of progress. This was something I had envisioned a few years prior, when I thought about, that I should be able to get create, if I teach my mind enough and do enough work, I should be able to create positive, intrusive thoughts, that my mind will react to things positively. And instead of thinking of what I couldn't do in a situation, it would instead react with things how I could do, how I could positively impact someone, how people could be a part of my life, how I could inspire and could make the lives of those around me better. And that did start to happen. There were even times where the positive thoughts started to overpower the negative ones. And that was a big deal. And I still remember that. I almost got emotional over that, because it just, after all these years, I mean, even before 2014, just never having my own mind, no support at all, always what I couldn't do, always what the impact I couldn't have. And finally starting to hear in my own head, like, hey, you might be able to cheer that person up. You might be able to impact that person positively, or, people could want you part of your life. Like it was starting to happen. Those thoughts were starting to pop in my head on their own. And it felt really, really good to see that vision come to pass. Like it really was like all this work I had just been doing, all this hell I just went through in the last, second half of 21, it was going to be worth something. Like I've got to make this, if I'm going to have to deal with these consequences of it, then it's got to be worth something. It's got to work. And it really, really was. I could feel the abuse was getting weaker, like really getting weaker. I was getting close. It was the first time I really started to feel like it's right there, that that tears of joy moment I had lived in my head so many times. It might happen. Like I'm getting close. This fight is almost over. I just have to keep going. And one issue was I was so very tired. I was exhausted, and I don't even know it. Physically exhausted is not the right way to say it. I mean, emotionally exhausted. Yeah, I've been emotionally exhausted for years. This was different. Like my soul was exhausted from all this. Like my will to keep fighting this fight was finally wearing thin. It was finally running out. I could feel that, things I'd get knocked down in something, I'd lose a battle, and something I would have easily gotten up from a few years ago, like no problem. Like, yeah, I'd lost battles, I'd lose plenty of battles. It's not going to win them all. And when I would get knocked down, I could just get back up and keep going, like, let's go. But that was running out. It was taking longer to pick myself back up, to keep going, to keep standing up to those abusive thoughts in my head. I was wearing out. And then just, the emotional consequences of all these new wounds that had been created from my memories being altered like this, just, it affected me so much. It suddenly, insecurities that I'd never had, like just little things where I could see how those wounds were now impacting me, in other ways. I wasn't reliving it anymore, but, the wounds, you don't just process it and then, okay, great, it's fully healed and that's it. To heal from that was going to be so difficult. It was going to take a lot of work, and it was not going to take this kind of work. It was, the way this kind of fight, it was so very different than, while this fight had always been, brute force, full speed ahead, go, keep doing more, dig it up, face it, and just nonstop. That worked for this, but it wasn't going. That approach was not going to work. To heal all those wounds that had been created, and to stop them from, impacting me. It was, and I didn't know if I was going to be able to do that. But honestly, I didn't really think about it that much at the time, because I was, this fight was the priority. So it was end this abuse in my head, get that voice to shut up finally, and we can go from there. And so I kept going. I kept, just kept at it, kept doing the work, kept trying to do the right things. to finish it off. And you know, I noticed, something that as we get to September, I noticed, the pain was still there from those wounds, but it's something it didn't really click in after a week or two that the abuse had stopped. That I was feeling this pain, but it was no longer accompanied with those thoughts that people don't want to be a part of your life because it's you. Why would they? Those types of thoughts they weren't showing up as a reaction to that pain anymore. And so I started to realize that I think I've done it. I think I've stopped it. I didn't really get to really feel it or realize it because I'm still in pain here. These wounds are still open. Because obviously keeping them open is how I continue to to face it and to create change there. But now if the abuse was gone, then this was it. This was it. I think I've won. And now if I want to finish this off and maybe get to feel that moment of triumph that I had imagined for so long, I had to stop, because I realized now the only thing keeping this pain out here was me fighting. And since this wasn't going to heal it, if I stopped fighting, then the wounds won't heal, but they could close, and then I could finally have peace. And so that was a tricky adjustment I knew I was going to have to try to make, but that was, that's what I was going to try to do. And at the same time, it had become just the emotions of simple things with trying to have, friends and a personal life now was just because of all those wounds. Everything was so overwhelming. I couldn't handle everything. I know I screwed up several good things since once that pain was unearthed, that if, it was so blinding, and it just twists you up in so many directions when feels like your heart's getting yanked around and just pulled apart in every direction. It was so hard to think straight and see things, for what they were. And I couldn't handle it. And I thought the best thing I need to do now is just shut it all down. Just stop trying. Don't try to have friends right now. Don't try to do anything. Just, Taekwondo, because that I could do. I had enough experiences that these wounds didn't really affect me from doing my job effectively, didn't affect me interacting with, people there. I could do all that and do it well. And so I just needed to shut it all down. And, I felt that would be the final step. So that's what I did. And wow, that was hard. I didn't realize how hard that was going to be, because wow, that fight had become so much a part of who I was. It was like every instinct. I mean, I didn't even have to really have the conversations anymore with myself, because they would instinctively happen in my head. Sometimes I wouldn't even, it's like subconsciously, and the answers would pop into my head later in the day. And it was just like, it was crazy. Like my mind just instantly wants to bring it up, think about it, go. And I was just like, okay, we got to stop. Like, this is not needed anymore. This is not, this is no longer going to be the right way to move forward. So I just had to try. I remember I would go for, walks, that walking path right near the festival, shopping center in Bel Air, and just focus on the sounds, the smells, the sights, just to, and just try to calm those instincts, just rein them back in now, because that was, essentially it was time. I had been fighting so hard for so long, but it was, there were no more demons to slay. There was no more darkness to attack. It was time to put the swords down, put my weapons down, and try to, try to find peace now. And so that's what I did. And, things started to get a little bit better as I stopped fighting and just started living existing, it started to get better. I noticed over, a week or so, Taekwondo became a lot more enjoyable again. It was, I could enjoy doing these things more. I mean, I still found, joy, and, it was the joy from, just the positivity of doing Taekwondo, and, those connections there was probably what was helped me significantly in getting through that difficult time. But now I could really, it was, I was starting to feel real joy in it again. And so, yeah, it was working. And, I kind of noticed how much it was working, and I could sort of get that like pit in my stomach, because it's like the end is right there. Everything I had worked for was, was right there. And, I always knew, I had thought about, I might get to the end of this, and maybe I won't get that moment of joy that I had always imagined, that where it would be over and it would hit me, and the joy would overcome me, and I would just cry tears of relief and joy. But I always wondered, what if I get to that point when it's truly over and I have that full day of freedom, and I don't get to feel that, and I don't get to feel that victory like that. And I knew I would be okay if it didn't happen, because all of the work I had done to overcome this would be well worth it. My life would be so much better off. But yeah, it would certainly be disappointing if I didn't get to, with how hard I had worked, with just everything I had endured, and how much I poured into this, to not, get to feel that would definitely be unfortunate and disappointing. But, I suppose it wasn't up to me. I guess, if either my emotions were going to give me that moment, or they weren't. And I would, either way the fight would end, and, I'd be better off, much better off for it, and then can move forward from this. So that's what I kept doing. I just kept not fighting, trying not to fight at least, just kept reining in those instincts, just existing, just living. And the pain, receded away. The wounds I could feel, the pain was coming out less and less, as because in truth, by not trying to have friends, that's where the pain was associated with. It was associated with friendship, connection, love, family, everything. So by just stop accessing those parts of my life, the pain, there was nothing to bring the pain out. And then, so I finally, I hit, I'll say the best way to probably explain it would be to share something a note that I had taken in my phone. Because that's something I had done many times, was, over the years, was use the Notes app, to take notes of things. If I had a thought or something that I wanted to look at later but didn't have time to currently, I could just jot it down real quick and, visit it later. So I did that a lot of times. I didn't keep most of them, because once I was done with something, I just deleted it. It certainly would be interesting to go back and look through it now, to go through, to see all the thought processes I had. But the last thing I was thinking about, in those moments was, let's save it so I can go look at it, years later. That was never, something I thought about. But there were a few that I've kept over time. Some of them are difficult reads, but I do have one that I'll definitely be holding on to. It was, especially in a time like this, I took a lot of notes, because, the decision to stop fighting and be like, yes, I've won, so now I have to stop, it was a scary one to make, because I had been doing it for so long now that just to let go of that was difficult. And so here's the one I have. I wrote it down. My phone is my camera, so I can't get it on my phone, but the date was October 14th, 2022. And this is what I was, laying in bed, about to go to sleep for the next day. And here's what I typed about the day. I said, peace. Like, wow, a full day of uninterrupted peace from start to finish. Have not had a day like this ever. All day at Chung's, interacting with students and parents. No darkness, no anxiety, no abuse, no pain, no heartache, no loneliness, no fighting. Nothing to fight, just peace. Normally thinking about it a lot throughout the day, looking for ways to beat it, but not today. Didn't think about it at all. Just enjoyed the day at Chung's, worked on my anxiety book, enjoyed music, watched baseball and Rings of Power, and played Ghost of Tsushima. It was all awesome. Today, I just lived. For the first time in 8.5 years, I just lived. And I'll never forget it. As soon as I typed those words, that I just lived, it hit me that what I had just done, that I had just lived a full day, free of everything. And as soon as that realization sunk in, I just cried. I just cried. The just pure tears of relief and joy. There was no music to stem it on, no thinking to bring it out, just pure natural tears of joy. And I just cried and just, I said to myself, I did it. Like I really did it. And just the joy that I felt in that moment was, that was like everything I had ever imagined. It just totally overcame me. And, I probably only cried for just about a minute, which it doesn't sound like a lot for something like this, but for me, I kind of my ability to cry was lost to me for a while there. And so me and crying, I would say, don't exactly have the greatest relationship, but to just, so for me, crying for a whole minute was probably like a normal person crying for like an hour at least, maybe multiple hours. But it was, just absolute euphoric joy just rushed all over me. And I think the best comparison I can make for it was, it's for my sports fans, like football, score the game-winning touchdown as time expires, or, baseball, walk-off home run, basketball, a buzzer beater, hockey, a playoff overtime goal, soccer, stoppage time winner. It was that kind of joy, except like 10 times better. It just, because, once I was done crying, I couldn't just go to bed. Like, I was so jacked up. I was so excited. Like, this is the moment I had dreamed of forever. And now I was living it, that joy of having overcome this and fully beaten it was just searing through me. And like, I just wanted to scream at the top of my lungs because I was so pumped up. But my parents were already asleep, so I didn't want to don't want them to think I'm getting murdered in my own room here and freak them out. So, but I got up, I started walking around, and I still had to yell, but I just kind of yelled in my head, just pumping my fist and just scream, going absolutely crazy. I was just losing my mind, just walking around my room, just fist bumping all over the place. It was, that was so good. That was it. That's what I had, man, that's just, I know my words here are not going to do this, or you're not going to do this justice. But it's, that joy, I can still feel it. I can close my eyes and think about it. And, just, if I'm ever having a bad day, I can always just go to that and remind myself of that, and it usually always gives me some kind of boost. It's just, oh, I probably was walking around just, I don't even know how long, it could have been 30 minutes. I don't even remember. I wasn't exactly keeping track of time. I mean, eventually I just had my hands on my head, just walking around, just like, I couldn't believe it. Like, I actually got to live that moment. It was, I couldn't believe it. It was amazing. It was by far the greatest moment of my entire life. It's just, after all that time of all the perseverance, all the fighting back, all the just going at it with absolutely everything. I mean, I gave absolutely everything to win that fight, to try to bring that moment to life. Like, I just, like, if it had asked, if that journey had asked any more of me, I don't think I could have gotten there. I could be wrong, but I remember the times where I was pushed to my absolute limit. Like, it's a strange feeling to be pushed that hard, and I wanted to experience that moment so badly, to end that fight, to get to feel that joy of winning, because this kind of work almost never comes with like feelings of gratification and joy like that. To feel like you do all this and then feel a victory. I wanted that so badly for so long. It was the one thing I really wanted, and I gave it absolutely everything. And after living that moment in my head well over 1,000 times, no doubt, it's not an exaggeration, the amount of times just imagining what that would feel like, and trying my hardest to live that moment, to just get myself to keep going, and just imagining what it would be like to feel it. And now, finally, I got to live that moment for real. And wow, that was just, there aren't any words to describe what that meant, to get to feel that victory, to feel like, I did it, like I won, like I did this, I finally got there. I'll never have to listen to that stupid voice in my head ever again tell me that people don't want to be a part of my life because it's me, that I couldn't have a positive impact on people because it's me. I'll never have to hear that stupid voice again. I did that. I made that happen. And don't worry, these are joyful tears. And I got to feel that joy of bringing that to life. After everything. Wow, that was... I really did it. I really did it. Oh, that was... Now you probably have a better idea of how much that meant. To not have to hear that voice anymore. That I finally did it. Oh, I could finally stop fighting and just live in peace. I had a chance to just live in peace, free of that abuse. Yes, and if we hadn't, by this point, hold on, give me a second. Jeez. Oh, man. I wasn't sure if I was going to cry sharing this part, but, well, here we are. Oh, to get there and, I lost my train of thought. Oh, man. Right, okay, I remember. It's, yeah, if, if we hadn't gotten to that point of, wow, this sounds made up yet. If we hadn't reached that point yet, this might get us there. Is a couple years prior to this, probably a little after I turned 28, which was so 21. So probably wouldn't have been thinking about this at the time, but in 22 when no before that. See, now I'm all crossed up. This would have been 20. See, I can't do math right now. From 2020 to early 2021, maybe. I thought about how much progress I had made, and I thought, I knew I was getting close to 30 now. It's like, it would be pretty cool if I could finish this fight in my 20s and get a chance to just live in my 30s. Like that was, I was like, that would be a nice timeline. Like finish this now, finish this coming up. And then, my 30s, I'd get a chance to just live free of it. Just be done with this and, exist without it. And, October 14th, 2022 was 5 days before my 30th birthday. It was just like, that's crazy. That's crazy. I mean, I'm not sure if I'm ever going to get a better birthday present than that, and get to have that moment to bring that impossible dream to life just in time to hit my 30th birthday. And that was it. That was the moment right there. It's been now a little over 3 years since that moment hit, and there's a few that I've messaged to about it. I've never talked about this. I've never talked about it out loud to anyone before. I didn't even tell anyone for a while. When it happened, at first I wasn't sure like why. Like there was definitely people I wanted to tell, but I just couldn't get myself to do it. I think I just wanted to not think about this stuff for a while. Just live and exist for a while. And plus, even, I'd gotten there and, the fight was over. It wasn't all totally over just yet. It was, because yes, I got that moment, the fight was done. It was, I had, that darkness was gone and I could just exist now, but the wounds weren't healed. This moment was great, but that wasn't going to heal those wounds. It doesn't take away from what that moment meant, but it was, it's like if you got stabbed and, you can pull the knife out but the wound is still there. If to excuse my violent example there, but, the wound doesn't just heal because you're no longer, stabbed. It takes, time and effort. And, and the truth is, healing, there's a myth about healing that, time heals all wounds, which couldn't be more of a myth. I mean, that's completely not true. It's a misconception because, you get a cut on your arm and over time it heals, right? But time is not what healed that wound. It is your body's biological processes that healed it. Those processes happen over time. And that's where I think the misconception comes from, because it was not technically the time that healed it. It was the process that underwent. Just in psychological wounds, unfortunately, there is no natural healing process for those. So they don't heal over time. They heal from a process. They heal with intention. And that intention over time is what heals. Time allows for change. It doesn't just make change happen. What that change is, if any, depends on the circumstances and you, or in this case, me. And so there was a lot of deep wounds. It was, I didn't feel confident in my ability to manage those emotions, and so I didn't feel it was safe to go now suddenly try to make friendships and build a personal life. I didn't want to screw things up in a way that would hurt someone or myself. I didn't. So I I kept going with the same idea that maybe it's not safe for me to have friends. Maybe it could be. It wasn't totally set in stone, but that was the path I had to stay on for now. And and I guess so. Healing from those wounds of all those corrupted emotional memories was one challenge that still was ahead. And the other challenge was probably the lesser known challenge, I guess I kind of talked about it already, though, was learning to live without this fight. This fight was so much of who I was. It was so intertwined in everything I did. I mean, it wasn't the only reason I did things, but it was always a part of the conversation. Whether and in some way, like if there was anything that I felt would negatively impact this fight, I wouldn't do it. It was, and that goal, that dream of finding peace, of getting that moment, that had been the whole focus of my life for 8.5 years. And now suddenly, just like that, the fight was over. That dream accomplished, but the story doesn't end. It's, life keeps going. And so now I was going to have to find a way to live without that without that purpose driving me, and without that fight to take up so much of my time. And I knew this was coming. I could tell, in those last few weeks leading up to this, that the fight was going to end, and that I was going to have to learn to live without it. So I had put some thought into it. I knew that was going to be a challenge. And so, of course, I, continue with, I figured I would just keep focusing on, having a positive impact on those around me. That would always be a purpose I could focus on, because you can do that, all the time. But for now, honestly, I wasn't really going to think too much on this, because I had just achieved the greatest victory of my life, and my impossible dream had just come true. I just got to live that. And I was going to enjoy that. I worked so hard for that. I got to take the time to just enjoy this, just go live a bit, exist for a bit. I think that was the best way forward. Just go through a whole bunch of days and not think about this stuff. Just live, just exist, just enjoy what I have. I had built a good, life for myself, and, a lot of things went my way there for that to happen. So, just enjoy it, just enjoy myself for a bit. And, most of all, rest. I was so dead. I was so exhausted. And now finally this was over. I didn't have to worry about if I stopped, I could lose progress. And, by not standing up to it, I could be giving into it, that I could just stop. I could rest and recover. And for me, that was the most important thing to do. And or now was, maybe down the road healing, maybe, but for now I wasn't even going to think about it. So, I was just going to rest, enjoy what I had worked so hard for, and, the healing, the rest could could wait. I could, I could finally just recover and enjoy this incredible moment that I I actually got to experience, and which was just, yeah, that was it. That was so special. So I was gonna enjoy that, and, you know, just live.